That night, I broke the first rule we were never supposed to break. I looked directly at the thing in the water when it surfaced at 3:47 a.m. I'm alive to tell you this story, which makes me luckier than most who've made that mistake. But alive doesn't mean unscathed. There are things I see now in still water, in mirrors after dark, in the corner of my vision when I'm alone, echoes of what looked back at me that night. I'm writing this 15 years after I left Beacon Rock Lighthouse, and my hands still shake when I think about that summer. Not just my hands, actually. My whole body carries the memory, like a scar that never quite healed. I was 22 then, fresh out of college with a marine biology degree, and absolutely nowhere to use it. The recession had hit hard. My student loans were coming due. My parents' basement was feeling smaller every day. When I saw the job posting on an obscure maritime employment board, it felt like a lifeline. Assistant lighthouse keeper needed. 3-month contract, June through August. Room and board included. $4,500 monthly stipend. Must be comfortable with isolation and able to follow detailed protocols. The pay was decent for 2010. The isolation didn't bother me. I'd always been more comfortable with books than people, and I figured protocols meant things like equipment maintenance schedules and weather reporting procedures. I was so stupidly naive. The interview was conducted in a harbor master's office in Portland, Maine. The woman who interviewed me introduced herself simply as Carol. No first name, no last name, just Carol. She was maybe 60, with skin like old leather and eyes that seemed to look through me rather than at me. She asked standard questions for about 10 minutes. My experience with boats, my comfort with radio equipment, whether I had any medical conditions that required regular doctor visits. Then she slid a laminated card across the desk. "Read this," she said. I picked it up. 10 rules were printed in red ink on white cardstock, the kind of lamination that suggested this card had been handled many, many times. Never look directly at the water between 3:30 a.m. and 4 a.m. If you hear knocking from below the lighthouse, do not answer. Keep all windows covered during the night shift. The supply boat comes every Friday at noon. It will not come at any other time. Do not write down what you see. Do not photograph it. If the light turns green, shut your eyes and count to 100. Never go into the water, regardless of what you see in it. Trust only what Captain Hayes tells you directly. The previous assistant left for personal reasons. Do not ask about him. If you want to leave before your contract ends, you may, but you cannot return to retrieve belongings. I read them twice, waiting for Carol to laugh and tell me this was some kind of initiation prank. She didn't laugh. "These rules are unusual," I said, trying to sound diplomatic. "They're not negotiable," Carol replied. "Every assistant keeper receives this card. Every assistant keeper must agree to follow these rules without exception. If you can't commit to that, this interview is over." I should have stood up and walked out. Looking back now, I can see all the warning signs, but I was 22 and broke and convinced that I was too rational, too educated, too modern to believe in whatever superstitions these rules represented. "I can follow rules," I said. Carol studied me for a long moment. Michael said the same thing. "Michael?" The previous assistant, her face gave away nothing. "Rule 9, don't ask about him." She stood up, signaling the interview was over. The boat leaves from Harrow Point Dock next Monday at 8 a.m. Be on it or don't. If you're not there, we'll find someone else. The boat that took me to Beacon Rock was a converted fishing trawler operated by a taciturn man who spent the entire journey smoking hand-rolled cigarettes and checking his watch. I tried to make conversation about the weather, the lighthouse, the island. He responded with grunts and nods. As we approached the island, I got my first real look at Beacon Rock Lighthouse. It was a traditional New England design, white tower with red trim, maybe 80 feet tall, perched on a rocky island that couldn't have been more than 2 acres total. The keeper's quarters were built into the base of the lighthouse, a squat 2-story structure that looked like it had been fighting the ocean wind for 100 years. The dock was just a simple wooden pier, and standing at the end of it was a man in his 60s wearing a navy peacoat despite the June warmth. Captain Hayes, I assumed. The boat operator brought us alongside the dock, but didn't tie off. He just held position with the engine while I grabbed my duffel bag and stepped onto the pier. "You read the rules?" Captain Hayes asked by way of greeting. He didn't offer his hand. I patted my jacket pocket where I'd put the laminated card. "Yes, sir." "Read them again, out loud, right now." I glanced back at the boat, but the operator was already pulling away, leaving a widening gap of dark water between me and the mainland. I pulled out the card and read all 10 rules aloud, while Captain Hayes watched me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. When I finished, he nodded. "Good. You'll read those every morning before breakfast and every evening before shift change. You'll read them until you can recite them in your sleep, because your life depends on remembering them when you're tired, when you're scared, when something is telling you to break them." "I understand," I said, though I didn't really. He picked up my duffel bag and started walking toward the lighthouse. "Your quarters are on the 2nd floor of the keeper's house. Mine are on the 1st. There's a common kitchen and a bathroom on each floor. The lighthouse tower is accessed through the keeper's house. You'll work days for the first month, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I'll work nights. We'll trade off for your 2nd and 3rd months, so you learn both shifts." I followed him inside. The keeper's house was exactly what I'd imagined: utilitarian, drafty, smelling of salt and coffee and old wood. My room was small but adequate. A single bed, a dresser, a desk, a window facing east toward the mainland. "Keep that window covered at night," Captain Hayes said from the doorway. "Rule 3 applies to all windows in the complex, not just the lamp room." "Even when I'm off duty?" "Especially when you're off duty. That's when you'll be tempted to relax, to forget." He set my duffel on the bed. "Dinner is at 7 p.m. I cook on my days, you cook on yours. We eat together, and I'll go over your duties. Unpack and meet me in the kitchen in 30 minutes. He left before I could ask any questions. I unpacked quickly, mostly just dumping clothes into the dresser drawers. The room felt strange, though I couldn't quite pin down why. It wasn't until I was hanging my jacket in the small closet that I realized. There were marks on the walls where pictures or posters had been removed, nail holes filled but still visible. Someone had lived here before me and had taken everything down in a hurry. Michael, the previous assistant, Rule 9 said not to ask about him, but it didn't say not to notice his absence. That first dinner was awkward. Captain Hayes cooked a simple meal: canned soup, bread, instant coffee, and we ate mostly in silence. He explained my duties in brief. clipped sentences, maintain the light, log the weather every 4 hours, monitor the radio, perform routine maintenance on the equipment, keep the living quarters clean. What about emergencies? I asked. Medical issues, equipment failures, that sort of thing. Medical emergencies, use the radio, channel 16, Coast Guard responds. Equipment failures, fix what you can, log what you can't, reported at Friday, supply delivery. Other emergencies. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Follow the rules. That handles most situations. Most situations? He looked at me directly for the first time all evening. All situations that you'll survive. After dinner, he showed me the Lighthouse tower. We climbed the spiral stairs to the lamp room at the top. The Fresnel lens was beautiful, a massive piece of precision glasswork that caught and bent the light from a relatively small bulb into a beam visible for miles. The light runs automatically, Captain Hayes explained, but you'll check it every 2 hours during your shift. Make sure the bulb is functioning, the lens is clean, the rotation mechanism is working smoothly. If anything seems off, you fix it immediately. This light has been operational for 127 years. It doesn't go dark on our watch. I noticed that every window in the lamp room had a heavy curtain mounted on a rod, ready to be drawn. Rule 3, I said. Rule 3, he confirmed. Curtains closed from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m., no exceptions. During the day, you can have them open for cleaning and maintenance, but if anything feels wrong, if you get an instinct to cover them, you do it immediately. Don't question the feeling. What am I avoiding seeing? If you follow the rules, you'll never have to find out. He started back down the stairs. Shift starts at 8 a.m. I'll be awake until 10 in case you need anything. Then I sleep until 6 p.m. Don't wake me unless the lighthouse is literally on fire. That first night alone in my room, I lay awake listening to the sounds of the island, the constant rumble and crash of waves, the wind whistling through gaps in the walls, the creaking of old wood settling, and beneath it all, something else, a rhythm that didn't quite match the natural sounds. Something patient and regular, like breathing. I told myself it was just the building, just the ocean, just my imagination in a strange new place. I pulled my blanket over my head and eventually fell into an uneasy sleep. The first week established a routine. I'd wake at 7 a.m., read the rules aloud while making coffee, then climb to the lamp room to officially start my shift. The work was straightforward but constant. Check the light, log the weather, monitor the radio, perform maintenance tasks from Captain Hayes's detailed checklist. The isolation didn't bother me as much as I'd expected. I'd brought a dozen books, and I quickly fell into a rhythm of reading during the quiet periods between duties. The island itself was too rocky and small to explore much, but I'd walk the perimeter during my breaks, watching seabirds and seals and the occasional fishing boat passing far offshore. Captain Hayes and I saw each other mainly during shift changes at 8 a.m. and 8 p.m. Our conversations were minimal, purely functional. He'd brief me on anything notable from his shift. I'd do the same, and we'd part ways. He spent his days sleeping or working on personal projects in his quarters. I spent my evenings reading and sleeping. We shared meals, but they were quiet affairs. The only regular outside contact was the supply boat, which arrived every Friday at exactly noon. The operator was a different person than the one who'd brought me to the island, a woman in her 50s with sun-damaged skin and reflective sunglasses she never removed. She'd pull up to the dock. I'd help her unload boxes of supplies, and she'd hand me a sealed envelope containing any mail or communications from the mainland. The first Friday, I tried to be friendly. "How long have you been running supplies out here?" She glanced at her watch, then at me, and held up one finger in a wait gesture. She finished unloading 3 more boxes, checked her watch again. It now read 12:11, and immediately started untying from the dock. "Wait, I have some questions," I started. She pointed at her watch, shook her head firmly, and gunned the engine. Within seconds, she was pulling away, the gap between boat and dock widening rapidly. I mentioned it to Captain Hayes that evening. The supply boat operator wouldn't talk to me. "Rule 4, he said, without looking up from his meal. "Boat comes at noon. It doesn't come at any other time. That means the delivery window is very precise. She gets in, unloads, gets out. No lingering, no conversation, no delays. Why? Because the things that follow the rules aren't the only things out here. And some of them pay attention to schedules." It was the most he'd volunteered about anything beyond pure logistics, and I didn't know how to follow up without violating Rule 9, which I suspected covered more than just Michael. So I ate my dinner in silence and wondered what I'd gotten myself into. It was in my second week that I found the photograph. I was logging weather data in the official Lighthouse logbook, a massive leather-bound volume that went back decades, when a photo fell out from between the pages. It showed a young man, maybe my age, standing by the lighthouse base with the ocean behind him. He was smiling, squinting against the sun, looking relaxed and happy. He wore a faded college sweatshirt and jeans. On the back of the photo, in neat handwriting, "Michael, day 47. My stomach went cold. Michael, the previous assistant. Rule 9 said not to ask about him, but here was proof he'd existed, that he'd stood where I stood, that something had happened to him on his 47th day. I looked at the photo for a long time. He looked so normal, so comfortable. Whatever had happened to him, he hadn't seen it coming. I should have put the photo back in the logbook and forgotten about it. Instead, I slipped it into my pocket. That evening, during our shift change, I pulled out the photo and showed it to Captain Hayes. His face went carefully, deliberately blank. "Where did you find this?" His voice was very quiet. "In the logbook, between the pages for last April and May." He took the photo from me, studied it for a long moment, then put it in his pocket. Rule 9. I know what Rule 9 says, but I found his picture. I'm living in his room. I have a right to know. You have a right to nothing, except the information that keeps you alive. Captain Hayes's voice was sharp now, harder than I'd heard it. Michael is gone. What happened to him is a lesson, not a story. And the lesson is simple. Follow the rules. But Rule 9 exists for your protection, not mine. Every assistant who survives their contract is someone who stopped asking questions and started trusting the rules. Every assistant who didn't survive is someone who thought they were smarter than the people who came before. He stood up. Your shift. I'll see you in the morning. He left me alone in the lamp room with my questions and my growing unease. But now I couldn't stop noticing the traces. They were everywhere once I started looking. In the kitchen, At the back of the cabinet, a coffee mug with an M on it. In the small library of paperback books in the common area, a thriller with pages dog-eared two-thirds through, and M. Torres written inside the cover. In the closet of my room, a rain jacket hanging on a hook, too small for Captain Hayes, exactly my size. Michael Torres had lived here. He'd read books and drunk coffee and worn a rain jacket when the weather turned bad. And then something had happened, something that meant his belongings stayed, but he didn't. And now I was here in his place, sleeping in his bed, following rules that he'd apparently broken. On day 19, I started finding his notes. The first note was tucked inside the copy of Moby Dick on the common room shelf. Just a scrap of paper with handwriting that matched the back of the photograph. The knocking isn't random. It's trying to communicate. I found the second note inside the desk in my room, taped to the underside of a drawer. Hayes knows more than he's saying. Why won't he explain what we're protecting ourselves from? The third note was in the lamp room, wedged behind the rotation mechanism. I've been counting. The thing in the water surfaces at exactly 3:47 a.m., never earlier, never later. That kind of precision means intelligence. Each note was dated. Day 15, day 23, day 38. Each one showed Michael becoming more curious, more frustrated with the rules, more convinced that understanding the phenomena was better than simply avoiding them. I should have shown the notes to Captain Hayes. I should have thrown them away. Instead, I kept them, and I started paying attention to the things the rules told me not to notice. On day 21, during an afternoon maintenance check, I forgot to close the east window curtain before I headed downstairs. It was an honest mistake. I'd been cleaning the window, got distracted by a problem with the rotation mechanism, and simply forgot. I was halfway to the kitchen when I remembered. My stomach dropped. Rule 3, keep all windows covered during the night shift. But it wasn't night yet. The sun wouldn't set for another hour. Technically, I hadn't broken the rule. Still, I ran back up the stairs. The lamp room was empty, the curtains still open, late afternoon sunlight streaming through. I crossed to the window to close it, and that's when I saw them, on the rocks about 200 yards offshore, where the reef broke the surface at low tide. Someone was standing. They wore dark clothes and stood perfectly motionless, facing the lighthouse. At that distance, I couldn't make out features, but I could see the shape of a person, human proportioned, standing on rocks that would be underwater in another hour. I stared for maybe 5 seconds, trying to process what I was seeing. Then I heard footsteps behind me. Captain Hayes was in the lamp room doorway, slightly out of breath from climbing the stairs quickly. His eyes went to the open window, then to me, then back to the window. "Did you see anything?" he asked, his voice tight. "No, I just forgot." "Did you see anything?" Each word was deliberate, heavy with importance. I hesitated. I didn't want to lie, but I also didn't want to admit I'd been looking at something the rules presumably wanted me to ignore. I thought I saw someone standing on the rocks, but that's impossible, right? The tide's coming in. Captain Hayes sat down heavily on the equipment bench. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked old and tired and frightened. "Describe them." "Everything you can remember." I couldn't see clearly. Dark clothes, maybe black or navy. They were just standing there, completely still, facing this direction. How long did you look? 5 seconds, maybe less. Did they move at all? Make any gesture? No, they were perfectly still. Did they wave? This is important. Did they wave at you or beckon in any way? The specificity of the question sent chills down my spine. No, they were just standing there. He exhaled slowly, tension draining from his shoulders. Good. That's good. Close the curtain. Don't look at that window again today. I pulled the heavy fabric across the window, blocking out the afternoon light. What was it? It wasn't a person. Then what? It was a test. He stood up, some of his usual composure returning. Everything out there is a test. The rules exist because people before us figured out how to pass the tests. When you break a rule, even accidentally, you're taking an exam you didn't study for. But I didn't really break the rule. It wasn't night yet. The rules are minimum guidelines. They tell you what you must do to survive. They don't tell you what you should do to be safe. Smart keepers treat sunset like night. Smarter keepers cover the windows all the time. He moved toward the door. I'm going to make coffee. When I come back, you're going to tell me if you found anything else Michael left behind. My face must have given me away because he nodded. Thought so. Bring the notes to the kitchen. It's time we had a longer conversation. Over coffee, I laid out the 4 notes I'd found. Captain Hayes read each one, his expression darkening. When he finished, he pulled out the photograph I'd found and set it beside the notes. Michael Torres, he said. 23 years old, marine biology graduate from University of Rhode Island. Started his contract on April 1st of last year. Smart kid, curious, methodical, exactly the kind of person who seems perfect for this job. What happened to him? He stopped following the rules. And then he stopped being someone who could leave. Captain Hayes refilled his coffee mug. I'm going to tell you some things that will sound impossible. I'm not asking you to believe me. I'm asking you to behave as if you believe me, because that's what keeps you alive. I nodded, my hands wrapped around my mug for warmth despite the June weather. Beacon Rock Lighthouse sits on a thin place, he began. That's not a technical term, it's just what we call it. A place where the normal world and something else overlap. The boundary is thin here, permeable. Things can push through from the other side if they try hard enough. Things? I don't know what they are. I don't think anyone does. They're not ghosts, not in any traditional sense. They're not demons or aliens or any other category humans have invented. They're just other. They exist in a space that overlaps with ours here, and they want very badly to pull people through to their side. He sipped his coffee, staring at nothing. The rules exist because keepers going back over 100 years have figured out how these things operate. They have limitations, boundaries they can't cross. They can't come to you. You have to go to them, or invite them, or acknowledge them in some way. The rules keep you from making those mistakes. The figure on the rocks, I said slowly. If I'd waved back, then you would have acknowledged it, engaged with it, opened a channel, and it would have started working on you, finding ways to draw you closer, until eventually you'd have gone down to those rocks or into the water. And then he shook his head. Michael waved. On his 33rd day, I saw him do it from down here. By then, it was already too late. What do you mean, too late? Once you acknowledge them, they don't leave you alone. They find other ways to reach you. The knocking gets louder. You start seeing things at the edge of your vision. They learn your voice, your memories, your desires, and they use all of it to lure you closer. I thought about the notes. Michael said the knocking was trying to communicate. It was. That's what makes this so difficult. They're not mindless. They're intelligent, patient, strategic. They study us. They learn what we want, what we fear, what we miss, and then they use it. Michael figured that out. Michael was smart enough to recognize the pattern, but not smart enough to recognize the trap. He started studying them back, taking notes, timing their activities, trying to understand their behavior. He convinced himself that knowledge would protect him, that if he understood them, he could control the situation. Captain Hayes's voice was heavy with old regret. I should have stopped him earlier. I saw the signs, the questions, the curiosity, the growing obsession, but I thought he'd stay on the safe side of the line. I thought he'd be careful. What happened on day 47? Captain Hayes was quiet for a long moment. He answered the knocking. The room felt very cold suddenly. It was his turn for night shift. Hayes continued. I was asleep down here. Around 4 a.m., I woke up to the sound of the door opening. By the time I got outside, I saw him climbing down the rocks toward the water. He was walking like he was in a trance, but his eyes were open. I shouted at him, but he didn't respond. He just kept walking until he stepped into the water. And then he was gone. Not drowned, gone. The water was only knee-deep where he walked in, but he disappeared like he'd stepped through a door. I searched for 3 hours, but there was nothing. No body, no clothes, no trace, just his jacket on the rocks, where he'd apparently taken it off before going in, like he was planning to come back. I felt sick. Did you report it? Of course. Coast Guard came, did a search, found nothing. Official report listed him as lost at sea, accidental drowning. His family got the death benefits from his life insurance, and 3 weeks later, you showed up for an interview. Does everyone know? Carol, the supply boat operator. Everyone involved with this lighthouse knows it's not a normal posting. The pay is too good, the isolation too extreme, the rules too specific, but most of the assistants finish their contracts without incident. Most people can follow simple rules for 3 months. It's only the ones who get curious, who need to understand why, who end up like Michael. He collected the notes and the photograph, tapping them into a neat stack. I'm telling you this because you're already curious. You found these notes, you asked questions, and that means you're at risk of making the same mistakes. So, I'm breaking the usual protocol. I'm giving you context, and now you have a choice. Take the warning and stay safe, or ignore it and see what happens. I'll follow the rules, I said. Good. Because tonight you're going to hear the knocking for the first time, and now you know exactly what it means. Captain Hayes was right. That night, lying in my bed, I heard it. 3 knocks from below my room. Patient, deliberate, unhurried. Pause. 3 more knocks. Every instinct told me to get up, to check what was making that sound, to investigate. But I stayed in bed, pulled my pillow over my ears, and thought about Michael walking into the water. The knocking continued for 7 minutes. I timed it. Then it stopped as abruptly as it had started. In the morning, Captain Hayes looked at me carefully. "You heard it." I nodded. "And?" I didn't answer. I didn't even get up. "Good." He poured himself coffee. "It'll probably happen again. Maybe not tonight, maybe not this week, but it will happen again. Each time it's testing you, each time you ignore it." The knocking became a regular occurrence, not every night, but often enough that I learned to expect it. Sometimes 3 knocks, sometimes 5, sometimes a whole rhythmic pattern that almost sounded like music. It was hardest when it seemed to be responding to my movements. I'd turn over in bed and hear 3 knocks, as if acknowledging me. I'd get up to use the bathroom and hear them following my progress across the room. I never answered. I never even looked for the source. I treated it like Captain Hayes had treated Michael's curiosity, as a trap that would spring the moment I engaged with it. But on day 38, I broke a different kind of rule. I was doing my routine day shift, checking the lamp room, when I noticed the safe. It was built into the wall, painted over to match the surrounding surface, but visible once you knew to look for it. And that day, for the first time since I'd arrived, it was open. Captain Hayes must have forgotten to lock it after his shift. I should have closed it and forgotten about it. I should have followed the principle behind Rule 9. Some knowledge isn't meant to be shared. Instead, I opened it fully and looked inside. There were 3 leather-bound books, similar to the official logbook, but smaller. I pulled out the top one and opened it at random. Pages and pages of handwritten observations, different handwriting styles suggesting multiple authors, dates going back 40 years. September 14th, 1974, 3:47 a.m., large displacement in water, approximately 200 yards offshore. Breach lasted 12 seconds. Did not observe directly. Ripples inconsistent with any known marine life. Suggest maintaining increased vigilance. March 3rd, 1981. Knocking from lower level. 4:33 a.m. to 4:41 a.m. 8 minutes duration. Pattern, groups of 5 with 3-second intervals. Did not respond. Increased frequency. Suggest heightened activity period. July 22nd, 1989. Figure on rocks during sunset. Dark clothing. Motionless for 18 minutes. No wave or gesture. Disappeared when I looked away and back. Not gradual fade. Instantaneous absence. Same location as sighting from July 1988. The entries were clinical, detailed, the work of people trying to document phenomena they couldn't explain. But as I flipped through the pages, I noticed the handwriting changing not just between entries, but within them. Earlier entries were neat and controlled. Later entries from the same person became messier, more frantic, until they simply stopped mid-page. I grabbed the second book, more of the same, but more recent, the 1990s and 2000s, and then I found Michael's entries. His handwriting was neat at first, almost identical to the earlier scientific observers. Day 12, knocking phenomenon at 3:17 a.m. Duration 4 minutes. Pattern suggests intentional communication rather than random occurrence. Hypothesis, intelligence behind behavior. Need more data points. Day 18, observed darkening of water at approximate coordinates. 41 degrees, 19 minutes, 42 seconds north. 70 degrees, 47 minutes, 15 seconds west at 3:47 a.m., duration 23 seconds. Surface disturbance significant, but no visual confirmation of source. Recommend remote video surveillance to capture phenomenon. But as the days progressed, his tone changed. Day 23. The knocking is definitely responding to my movements. When I walked across the room, it shifted location. When I stopped, it stopped. This isn't random. This is interactive. Why are we not studying this? The rules say to ignore it, but ignorance isn't safety. It's just willful blindness. Day 28. Found older logbooks in the safe. Hayes doesn't know I have the combination. I watched him open it last week and memorize the sequence, reading through 40 years of observations. Every keeper has documented the same phenomena. Every keeper has treated it as a threat. But what if we're wrong? What if it's not hostile, just misunderstood? Day 31. I'm starting to understand. The rules aren't for our protection. They're for isolation. Hayes and everyone before him have been so afraid that they've never tried to communicate. But what if these things are reaching out? What if they need help? I'm going to find out. Day 35. It spoke to me. Not in words, but I understood. It's alone. It's been alone for so long. All it wants is acknowledgement, connection. The rules are cruel. We've been ignoring a sentient being's attempts at contact for over a century. Day 40. Hayes is getting suspicious. He knows I'm watching, listening, paying attention. He gave me a lecture about curiosity and safety. He doesn't understand. I'm not being reckless. I'm being humane. Whatever this is, it deserves recognition. Day 45. I saw it clearly last night, 3:47 a.m. exactly. I broke Rule 1 and looked directly at the water. It's beautiful. It's not a monster or a demon. It's something we don't have words for, something that exists in a space between what we know and what we can't imagine. It looked at me, and I understood. The rules are wrong. The fear is wrong. Tomorrow night, I'm going to make contact. Day 47. Tonight's my night shift. When it surfaces, when it calls, I'm going to answer. I'm going to show it that not all humans are afraid. Hayes will understand eventually. This is going to change everything. The entry ended there. The next page was blank. Then, in different handwriting, Captain Hayes's distinctive, small, precise script. Day 48. Michael failed to report for duty. Found his jacket on the rocks a low tide. Water temperature 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Coast Guard notified. Search conducted. No body recovered. Official cause, accidental drowning. Actual cause, engagement with entity despite protocols. Third assistant lost in 40 years. Will recommend revised screening procedures. Note to self, remember to lock the safe. Below that, a few more lines added later. Day 50. Michael's parents came to collect his belongings. Told them he was a good kid, careful and responsible. They asked if he'd seemed depressed or suicidal. I said no. They asked if there was any way he could still be alive. I said no. Both statements were true. I stood there in the lamp room, holding the logbook with shaking hands. Michael hadn't been reckless or careless. He'd been compassionate. He'd convinced himself that the thing in the water was reaching out, was lonely, was misunderstood, and that belief had killed him. I heard footsteps on the stairs, heavy boots, taking them two at a time. Captain Hayes appeared in the doorway, out of breath and his eyes went immediately to the open safe, then to the logbook in my hands. We stared at each other for a long moment. "You read it?" he said. It wasn't a question. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. The safe was open and I just—" The words tumbled out in a rush. "I forgot to lock it after my shift. I came up as soon as I realized." He walked over slowly. "Now you know what I know." Michael thought it was trying to communicate. Michael thought wrong, or rather, he was right about the communication, but wrong about the intent. Captain Hayes took the logbook from me and flipped to a page near the beginning. "Read this. Entry from 1976. I read, August 12th, 1976. Assistant Keeper William Marsh went into the water at 3:51 a.m. I saw him from the lamp room. He was responding to what he described earlier as music coming from below. His last words, shouted back to me before he submerged, "They need me. They're calling me home." He sounded joyful. His body was never found. Captain Hayes turned to another page. "And this, 1992. January 4th, 1992. Assistant Keeper Sarah Chen answered the knocking on day 63. I found her standing at the door to the lower level, having a conversation with empty air. She said she was learning their language. 6 hours later, she walked into the ocean during daylight hours. She was smiling. Coast Guard recovered her body 2 days later. Autopsy showed seawater in lungs, but also unexplained neural damage, as if part of her brain had been physically removed. Medical examiner ruled accidental drowning, did not mention the brain abnormalities in official report. Captain Hayes closed the book. "You see the pattern? Every person who engages with these things becomes convinced they're benevolent. They hear what they want to hear. They see what they want to see. The entities are very good at becoming whatever will draw you in. Lonely? They're lonely too. Scientific? They're a fascinating phenomenon worth studying. Compassionate? They're victims who need help. But what are they really? Hungry? Patient? Smart enough to wear whatever mask works." He returned the logbook to the safe and spun the combination lock. Michael wasn't wrong that they communicate. He was wrong about what they were communicating. They don't want connection. They want passage, and they need us to willingly provide it. "What do you mean, passage?" "I mean, they can't cross over on their own. The boundary between their space and ours has rules, just like everything else. They can push against it, create effects we can perceive, sounds, images, even physical manifestations. But they can't fully cross into our world unless we invite them. And once invited, once acknowledged and accepted, they can use us as anchors. They can pull themselves through by pulling us back." I thought about Michael walking into the water, about Sarah Chen's missing neural tissue. What happens to the people they take? I don't know. I don't think anyone knows. They don't come back to tell us. He locked the safe with a definitive click. What I do know is that the rules work. 40 years, dozens of assistant keepers, and only 3 losses. And all 3 violated multiple rules before the end. The people who follow the rules go home after 3 months. It's that simple. Then why not just tell assistants everything from the start? Why Rule 9? Why keep Michael's story secret? Because knowledge is a double-edged sword. Some people hear there are entities trying to lure you and become more cautious. Others hear it and become curious. They start wondering what the entities are really like, whether the warnings are exaggerated, whether they might be the one person who can safely make contact. Michael was the second type. And now I need to know, which type are you? I looked at the locked safe, thought about the notes I'd collected, the questions I'd been asking. A month ago, I might have been like Michael, but I've been hearing the knocking. I've seen the figure on the rocks, and I've read what happens to people who engage. I'm the first type now. I want to survive this. Good. Some tension left his shoulders. Then we're going to make some changes to your routine. You're going to start following the maximum guidelines, not just the minimum ones. Windows covered all the time, not just at night. You're going to sleep with headphones playing music so you can't hear the knocking clearly. You're going to stay out of my quarters, I'll stay out of yours, so you're never alone in a space where Michael spent time. Sometimes they leave impressions, suggestions, hooks in places where someone engaged with them. What about you? How do you handle this place? He smiled grimly. I've been here for 17 years, 3-year contracts, renewed 6 times so far. You build up resistance, learn to recognize their tactics. The first year is hardest. By the 3rd year, the knocking barely registers, but it never goes away completely. This place takes a piece of you, even if you follow all the rules. You just have to make sure it doesn't take all of you. Why do you stay? Because someone has to. And because I failed Michael. I saw him slipping, saw him getting curious, and I didn't intervene forcefully enough. I thought he was smart enough to figure it out. I was wrong. So I stay, and I try to keep the next person safe, and the next, and the next. It's a kind of penance. He moved toward the stairs. Your shift. I'm going to sleep. When you do your rounds tonight, start reading the logbooks, the official ones, not the private ones. Get familiar with routine weather patterns, normal maintenance issues, the daily rhythms of this place. Fill your head with boring, practical information. Give the entities nothing to work with. He paused at the door. And if you hear your name being called, in any voice, at any time, from any direction, ignore it. They've learned your voice from me talking to you. They'll use it. Understood. One more thing. He pulled something from his pocket, the photograph of Michael. He handed it to me. Keep this. Not to remember him, but to remember what happens when you think you're special, when you think the rules don't apply to you. Every person they've taken thought they were different, thought they understood something no one else did. They were all wrong. I took the photograph and looked at Michael's smiling face, frozen on day 47, hours before he walked into the ocean. I'll keep it. Captain Hayes left, and I was alone in the lamp room with the locked safe and my thoughts. The days after I read the logbooks were different. I started noticing things I'd been unconsciously filtering out. The way the wind sometimes carried sounds that weren't quite natural, almost like words, almost like music. The way the rocks offshore seemed to have different configurations depending on when you looked at them. The way my reflection in the lamp room windows sometimes seemed slightly off, moving a fraction of a second after I did. I followed Captain Hayes's maximum guidelines religiously, windows always covered, headphones playing music at night. I avoided my room during the day, spending my off hours in the common areas where Michael had spent less time. I read the official logbooks cover to cover, filling my head with decades of weather patterns and maintenance records. The knocking continued, but I'd learned to tune it out. The figure on the rocks appeared several more times, but I never looked directly at it. Twice I heard someone calling my name in Captain Hayes's voice, but both times I confirmed he was asleep in his quarters before ignoring the calls. I thought I was doing well. I thought I'd learned the lessons Michael hadn't. Then, on day 58, Captain Hayes got sick. It started with food poisoning, bad canned soup, a rookie mistake. By evening, he was in his quarters, feverish and vomiting, in no condition to take his night shift, which meant I'd have to do my first overnight shift, the 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. stretch I'd been dreading since I read Michael's logbook entry about his final night shift. "I can manage," he said, barely able to lift his head. "Give me a few hours, and You're not going anywhere. I've got this." I tried to sound more confident than I felt. "I know the protocols. I'll follow the rules." "Maximum guidelines," he insisted. "All windows covered. Stay in the lamp room as much as possible. If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you radio the Coast Guard and tell them we have a medical emergency. You understand? Don't try to tough it out." "I understand. The window between 3:30 and 4 a.m. That's when you'll be most vulnerable. That's when it's strongest. Keep your eyes on your work. Don't look outside. Don't listen to anything that isn't the Lighthouse systems. Just get through that half hour, and you'll be fine." I set him up with water, crackers, and a bucket, then headed up to the lamp room to start my shift. The first few hours were fine. I did my routine checks, logged the weather, monitored the radio. The sun set, and I made sure every curtain was drawn tight. The darkness outside pressed against the windows like something alive, but I kept my attention on the lamp, the beautiful Fresnel lens casting its beam across the dark water I couldn't see. At midnight, I heard the knocking. It was louder than usual, more insistent, groups of 5 with 3-second intervals, just like it had been for Michael. I put in my headphones and turned up the music. At 1 a.m., I heard something that made me pause the music, a sound from outside the lamp room, from the stairs, footsteps, slow and deliberate, coming up toward me. "Captain Hayes?" I called out. No answer. The footsteps continued. I grabbed the flashlight we kept in the lamp room and went to the door. The spiral staircase below was empty, but the footsteps continued getting closer. I could hear them, could almost feel the vibration of them on the metal stairs, but there was nothing there. I slammed the lamp room door and locked it. My hands were shaking. The footsteps reached the door. I heard them stop just outside. Then the doorknob started to turn, slowly, testing the lock. I backed away from the door, my heart hammering. The doorknob stopped moving. A moment of silence, then 3 knocks, right on the door, so loud they made the metal rattle. I didn't answer. I went back to the lamp, focused on the rotation mechanism, on the bulb housing, on anything except the door and what was standing outside it. The knocking stopped. The lamp room was silent, except for the hum of the light mechanism and my own ragged breathing. I checked my watch. 1:17 a.m. Still 2 hours and 13 minutes until the danger window Captain Hayes had warned me about, and already things were escalating. I put my headphones back in and tried to focus on work, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was in the room with me. The air felt thicker, harder to breathe. The shadows in the corners seemed darker than they should be, and despite the music playing in my ears, I could almost hear something underneath it, a voice, many voices, speaking in a language I didn't know, but somehow understood. They were calling me. They knew I was alone. They knew Captain Hayes couldn't help me, and they were patient. At 3 a.m., I did a check of the light and noticed something wrong. The beam seemed dimmer than usual. I examined the bulb. It was fine, the lens clean and properly aligned, but the light itself seemed to be fading, as if something was absorbing it. I checked the power supply. Everything was normal, but the light continued to dim, slowly but steadily, the beam that should have been visible for miles shrinking to barely a few hundred yards. I radioed the Coast Guard, as Captain Hayes had instructed. "This is Beacon Rock Lighthouse. We have a static, pure static, so loud I had to pull the radio away from my ear. I tried channel 16, channel 22, every channel I could think of, all of them, static. The lighthouse was isolated. The radio was out. Captain Hayes was sick in bed below. And I was alone in the lamp room with a failing light and something outside that wanted in. I looked at my watch. 3:29 a.m. The danger window was starting. I positioned myself with my back to all the windows, eyes locked on the lamp mechanism. I checked it obsessively, every bolt, every wire, every connection. I didn't care if nothing was wrong. I needed something to focus on, something concrete and real and mechanical. At 3:35 a.m., I heard it, a sound from the water outside. Not the usual crash of waves, but something else, a breath, a massive exhalation that moved across the surface of the ocean like a living thing passing beneath. I kept my eyes on my work. I didn't look. I didn't even glance toward the covered windows. The breathing continued, slow, rhythmic, patient, and beneath it I heard something else, a voice, familiar somehow, speaking just loud enough to be heard through the covered windows and my headphones. "Hey, hey, can you hear me?" I froze. I knew that voice. I'd heard it in my imagination every time I looked at Michael's photograph, every time I read his notes, young, earnest, friendly. Michael's voice. "I need help. Please, I'm stuck out here. I've been out here since last year, and nobody can see me. But you can. I know you can. You read my notes. You understand. Please, just look at me. Just acknowledge me. Then I can come back." I squeezed my eyes shut and focused on counting. 1, 2, 3. This wasn't Michael. Michael was gone. This was something wearing his voice like a costume. "I know you found my journal. You know I'm real. You know I was trying to do the right thing. I made a mistake, and I've been paying for it, and I just need someone to see me, to really see me. Then I can come home. 4, 5, 6. My hands were shaking so hard, I had to grip the lamp mechanism to steady them. "Captain Hayes lied to you. I'm not gone. I'm just on the other side, and I can't get back alone. You're the first person who's cared enough to read my notes, to try to understand. You're different. You're smart. You're compassionate. Please, I'm so cold out here. I'm so alone." 7, 8, 9. I thought about the logbook entries, William Marsh hearing music, Sarah Chen learning their language. Everyone convinced that what they were experiencing was real communication from something that needed help. "Just look at me. Just once. Open the curtain. Look at the water. You don't even have to come down here. Just let me know you see me. That's all I need. Please." My hand moved toward the window curtain. I caught myself, pulled back. The voice sounded so sincere, so desperate, but I thought about Michael's jacket on the rocks, about Sarah Chen's damaged brain, about William Marsh's body, never found. Why won't you help me? I helped you. I left those notes so you'd understand. I'm trying to protect you from Hayes's paranoia. He's been alone out here too long. He sees threats where there aren't any. I'm not a threat. I'm a victim. And you're the only one who can save me. 10, 11, 12. The voice was getting closer, as if Michael, or the thing wearing his voice, was right outside the window now, pressed against the glass behind the curtain. You're running out of time. The window closes at 4 a.m. If you don't acknowledge me before then, I'll be stuck for another cycle, another day, another month, another year. You'll leave like all the others, and I'll still be here, alone. Don't do that to me. Please. I don't deserve this. 13, 14, 15. And then the voice changed, became angry. You're just like Hayes. Too afraid to see the truth, too weak to step outside the rules. I thought you were different. I left you everything you needed to understand, and you're still cowering in here like a child. Fine. Stay in your cage. Follow your rules. Die never knowing what you could have been. The anger shocked me into stopping my count. This was the real voice, I realized, the mask slipping. The thing pretending to be Michael, showing its true nature. But you'll think about this moment forever, the voice continued, no longer Michael's, deeper and stranger, something that approximated human speech, but came from a throat that wasn't human. You'll wonder what I really was. You'll wonder if you made the right choice. You'll wake up at 3:47 a.m. for the rest of your life, wondering what you missed. That's the price of your cowardice, not death, doubt, forever. I started counting again. 20, 21, 22. The voice laughed. It was a terrible sound, starting human and ending as something else, something vast and cold and patient. We're always here. You can't stay in the lighthouse forever. Eventually you'll need to leave. And the ocean is everywhere. We'll be waiting. 23, 24, 25. Then the light flickered and turned green. Rule 6. If the light turns green, shut your eyes and count to 100. I closed my eyes so fast I stumbled, grabbing the lamp mechanism to steady myself. Behind my eyelids, I could see the green glow, so bright it penetrated my closed eyes. 1, 2, 3. I counted carefully, precisely, not rushing despite my terror. Outside, I heard movement in the water, something huge, something that displaced massive amounts of water, rising to the surface. The lighthouse shook with vibrations I could feel in my bones. 25, 26, 27. The breathing was so loud now, it drowned out everything else. Not one breath, but many, layered, overlapping, as if dozens or hundreds of things were breathing in unison just beyond the windows. 50, 51, 52. Something touched the lighthouse. I felt it, a pressure against the stone, as if something was pressed against the tower, wrapped around it. The lamp room tilted slightly, and I heard metal creaking. 75, 76, 77. The windows rattled in their frames, the curtains billowing inward despite being closed. The air pressure in the room changed, became painful, like being underwater. My ears popped. I tasted salt. 95, 96, 97. The breathing stopped. The shaking stopped. The pressure released so suddenly I gasped. 98, 99, 100. I opened my eyes. The light was white again, the normal beam casting across the darkness. The lamp room was still, quiet, undamaged. My watch read 4:03 a.m. I'd made it through. I collapsed onto the equipment bench, shaking so hard my teeth chattered. Through the covered windows, I heard only the normal sound of ocean waves. No breathing, no voices, no presence pressing against the glass. The danger window had closed. I'd survived. But the voice had been right about one thing. I would think about this moment forever. I didn't leave the lamp room until Captain Hayes came up at 8 a.m. He looked terrible, pale and unsteady, but he took one look at my face and sat down next to me. "You heard it?" he said. I nodded. I couldn't quite speak yet. Michael's voice? At first, then something else. The light turned green? Yes, I counted. I made it through. He put a hand on my shoulder. "You did well. Better than most. You're going to be okay." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that by surviving that night, I'd marked myself somehow, that the thing in the water knew me now, would always know me. It said it would wait for me, that I couldn't stay in the lighthouse forever. It says that to everyone who resists. Empty threat. You followed the rules. You survived the contact attempt, and now you're hardened. It can't touch you the same way again. The first major challenge is always the hardest. There are more challenges. There are always tests, but they get easier, or you get stronger. Amounts to the same thing. He stood up slowly. "Finish your shift. I'm going back to bed. Tomorrow we go back to normal schedule, and in 3 more weeks you go home. You finish your contract, you collect your pay, and you never have to think about Beacon Rock again." But he was wrong about that last part. I did finish my contract. The last 3 weeks were quiet, almost anticlimactic. The knocking continued occasionally, but it felt distant, half-hearted, like something going through the motions. The figure on the rocks appeared a few more times, but it never moved, never gestured. The entities had tested me, and I'd passed, and they'd moved on to wait for the next person. On my last day, Captain Hayes helped me load my duffel bag onto the supply boat. The same woman operated it, still wearing her reflective sunglasses, still not speaking. "Any advice for the next person?" I asked Captain Hayes. "I'll tell them what I told you. Follow the rules, ignore the tests, survive the 3 months. It's not complicated." "Will you tell them about Michael?" He considered that. "Depends on the person. Some people need the context. Some people are safer not knowing. I needed to know." "You did. But you're also the first person in 5 years who read the notes without letting them guide you into danger. Most people read Michael's thoughts and start to think like him. You read them and learned from his mistakes. That's rare." The supply boat operator honked her horn. Noon exactly. "Thank you," I said, "for keeping me alive. Thank you for following the rules." He handed me an envelope. "Your payment plus a bonus for taking that night shift. And if you ever need a recommendation for another job, you can use me as a reference. What you did here, staying rational, staying safe, resisting the lure of understanding that takes a kind of strength most people don't have. I stepped onto the boat, and within seconds, the gap between the dock and the vessel was widening. Captain Hayes raised one hand in farewell, and I waved back. The last thing I saw as we pulled away was him walking back toward the lighthouse, shoulders squared, ready for another 3 years of keeping the light burning and the rules enforced. That was 15 years ago. I'm 47 now. I went on to complete my master's degree in marine biology, then my doctorate. I've studied creatures in the deepest trenches of the ocean, phenomena that science can barely explain, ecosystems that exist without sunlight. I've spent my career exploring the unknown, but I've never gone back to Beacon Rock Lighthouse. I still have Michael's photograph in my desk drawer. I look at it sometimes, usually late at night when I can't sleep. He looks so young, so confident, so certain that understanding would protect him. I wonder if he felt fear at the end, or if he'd convinced himself so completely that he walked into the water with joy, believing he was finally going to comprehend something beautiful. I still wake up sometimes at 3:47 a.m. exactly, heart pounding, listening to the silence of my apartment for sounds that shouldn't be there. I still avoid looking at still water after dark. I still hear knocking sometimes in old buildings. And I still never answer. And sometimes, not often, maybe once or twice a year, I'll be near the ocean and I'll hear something. A breath beneath the waves, a voice that almost sounds human, a pattern in the surf that seems too regular to be random. And I remember the rules. I remember what happens to people who engage, who acknowledge, who try to understand what was never meant to be understood. I remember, and I look away, and I survive. I check the lighthouse keeper job postings occasionally. The listing for Beacon Rock appears every few months, identical wording every time. Assistant lighthouse keeper needed, 3-month contract, room and board included. Must be comfortable with isolation. I see the posting, and I think about Captain Hayes, still there after all these years, still keeping the light burning. I think about the assistants who've come and gone, the ones who followed the rules and went home safely. I think about the 3 who didn't. Last year, I saw that the pay had gone up, $6,000 monthly now, adjusted for inflation, sure, but also reflecting the fact that they're having a harder time finding qualified people. The internet has made isolation less appealing. Young people don't want to spend 3 months cut off from the world, even for good money. But someone always takes the job. Someone always needs the money, or the solitude, or thinks they're strong enough to handle it. I hope they read the rules. I hope they follow them. Some places aren't meant to be understood. They're meant to be survived. Some rules exist not because someone wants to control you, but because people died learning what happens when you break them. If you've ever worked a job with strange rules, rules that didn't make sense, but that everyone followed religiously, rules that seemed designed to protect you from something nobody would explain, I want to hear about it. What were you being protected from? Did you ever break one of the rules? What happened when you did? And if you've ever been the person who had to ignore your curiosity, who had to follow rules you didn't understand, simply because the alternative was too dangerous to risk, tell me about that too. How did it feel to choose safety over understanding? Do you ever regret not taking the risk, or do you wake up grateful that you're still here to wonder? Drop your stories in the comments. And if you want more tales from places where the rules keep you safe, hit that subscribe button. Some stories need to be told, even if we don't fully understand them. Some warnings need to be passed along, even if we can't explain exactly why. Stay safe out there. Trust the rules, even when they don't make sense, especially when they don't make sense. And if you ever see a job posting for Beacon Rock Lighthouse, maybe let it pass you by. Captain Hayes is still there, still keeping the light burning, still waiting for the next assistant who thinks they're different, who thinks they're special, who thinks the rules don't apply to them. Don't be that person. Just don't look at the water at 3:47 a.m. Trust me on this one.